Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about escaping the echo chamber. So let us begin. The author of the article begins by noting that there's a lot of disagreement in a contemporary society in the US and throughout the globe. And a lot of it is not just disagreeing about particular issues, but much larger polarization, much larger ways of looking at the world that seem to be so different from each other, that it seems that people live in their own bubbles. It seems that people disagree not just about what practice or policy is just or unjust, but they seem to disagree even about the facts, even about what evidence is out there. In the interpretation of reality seems to be so radically different that there seems to be very little common ground. As some people put it, people in the U.S. live in two different nations. That's one way of putting it. So that's the impetus. That's the kind of the motivation for trying to make sense of the epistemic dimensions of these kinds of groups of people that get together and they see the world differently. So one of the categories, epistemic categories that the author puts forth is what he calls epistemic bubbles. So let's begin with epistemic bubbles. The real main target for this lecture, for the article as well, is what he calls echo chambers. But epistemic bubbles provide one step towards understanding what it is for something to be an echo chamber. So here's the definition of an epistemic bubble. An epistemic bubble is a social structure or an informational network that excludes dissenting voices by omission. So it is a kind of bubble. It's a collection of people that hang together. Say they go to the same club, they go to the same church, they go to the same group in social media, something like that. There's this shared interest that binds them into a particular kind of group. They don't have to be physically together, but there's some space, either online or physical space, that brings them together, and they have shared interest. And they tend to form these bubbles. What makes them bubbles is the latter part of the definition. There's exchange of information, there's exchange of views, there's articulating of positions, and so on. But what makes it a bubble is that dissenting, that is, people that disagree, are excluded by omission. They're not part of the conversation. People that think differently are just not in the group. So it is this omission that is what makes it an epistemic bubble. And sometimes it is just unintended. People that go to a club, it just does not cross their mind to include people that disagree about something. People that go to a particular church, it just doesn't cross their mind to interact with people that disagree with them, and so on. So the omission, the blocking, the not including information from dissenting or disagreeing perspectives can be and often is just completely unintended. It's just the result of the natural tendency that humans have to congregate around people that look like them, that think like them, that talk like them, that people that shared beliefs and so on. So we tend to congregate with people that agree with us, that look like us, and so on. And sometimes that just naturally leads to an epistemic bubble. The repeating kind of repetition of the same views that reinforce the positions of the group, and then no external voice represented. However, oftentimes the omission is purposeful. That is, people choose to not allow other members in, or choose to not expose themselves to dissenting or disagreeing opinions. If you go to a church, you may know that there's a church across the street that has very different ways of thinking. Or if you're in the social group about some topic, sports, you know that there's this other social group that has very different take and very similar sports, something like that. But then you feel uncomfortable even talking to or hearing what the other person has to say. Something about the disagreement just feels wrong. So because it feels wrong, because you feel uncomfortable, you just you don't interact with them. So that kind of purposeful avoidance is a way of excluding by omission the participation of dissenting voices. That's part of what creates epistemic bubble, because you feel uncomfortable with people that look like you, that don't look like you don't listen to what they have to say, and your voices your opinions keep being reinforced by people that have the same voices that you do. So in essence, what makes a group of people or a network an epistemic bubble is that they're not really exposed to dissenting views, to other perspectives. They're all agree on same topics, and that's why they hang together. Echo chambers, though, that's the main topic, and that looks like epistemic bubbles, but it's in many ways more pernicious. It's more robust. It's a different kind of social entity. So here's the short definition. An echo chamber is an information network or a social structure that actively discredits outsiders. Nothing in epistemic bubbles includes the exclusion of the others, people outside as necessarily mistaken or evil or something like that. There's no discrediting of other people's opinions, at least not in epistemic bubbles. That's an essential characteristic of echo chambers, though. One is in an echo chamber when part of the information being conveyed in the chamber is how bad people outside are, how wrong they are about, say, disagreeing with you. That's starting to become an echo chamber. Furthermore, members of echo chambers, for them, a condition for credibility for any topic, for any claim, is group membership. The first thing that they care about is whether or not you're in their group. And it is knowing whether or not you're in the group that is a necessary condition for them to listen to you, at least to listen in the sense of actually hearing what you have to say, not just, being there exposed to your words. So for the echo chamber members, that someone is in automatically counts as a reason for trusting them, for listening to what they have to say. If someone is outside of the echo chamber, automatically counts as a reason to distrust them. Something's wrong with some people that are outside. And typically it's pretty strong. People outside of the group are typically seen from within the group as either stupid or evil. It's not just that they're mistaken, but that they fail to see what any reasonable, normal person would see. So they're stupid, they're just not wrong. And they're evil. It's not just that they, again, are mistaken, but that they have very malicious intentions. There's something very dark about them. They're kind of demonic. They want to destroy the world or something. Like, it's a pretty grand. A further weird feature that tends to happen in echo chambers is that within the echo chamber itself, it's not like everyone has equal voice. There's tend to be this monopoly by one or a few members, and they become like the oracles that dispense the truth. So a very limited set of voices within the echo chamber achieve a kind of status of like infallibility. They are seen as the ultimate source of all credibility. And now people don't look at evidence exactly. They look at what this person in the inside says, and then they look not at the evidence provided by people outside, but really just on what they say. So the status of typically one or a handful of people within the echo chamber becomes one of like this godlike status. They have great authority, and people are seeing them as the ultimate source of truth. There's something super special about it. Furthermore, and this makes the phenomena of echo chambers particularly pernicious and hard to deal with, when people that are part of the echo chamber are in fact exposed to things outside, this external disagreement does not challenge them. In fact, it's often seen as further support for their own views because it's interpreted as corroboration of the existence of some sort of an organization controlling everything but the group. And furthermore, because the external people disagree, that's further evidence that not only are they being controlled by this organization, but rather they're trying to oppress or suppress or do away with the members of the echo chamber, the few ones that remain to know the truth. That seems to be a distinctive feature of echo chambers. It's not that they're not exposed to other information, but the way they deal with it is very different than epistemic bubbles. So there are problems with bubbles. There are epistemic problems. Being within an epistemic bubble is not a good strategy for attaining truth. There are much better ones. And here are some of the problems with epistemic bubbles. They exclude potentially beneficial information from outside and only listening to people that are like-minded. Those that are members of epistemic bubbles fail to take advantage of the knowledge that it lies outside of the group. So actively excluding people like echo chamber, or just by omission, like epistemic bubbles, omitting the valuable knowledge that people have outside of the group is detrimental for people within the group. It makes them know less. So looking for other people's agreement is one good way of checking for the correctness of one's reasoning. That's why in science, there are repeated experiments. That's why in academic circles, there's peer-reviewed journals and so on. The very intelligent thought here is that if one believes something, the corroboration of that by independent people, it's further justification for it. If one is a member of an epistemic bubble and fails to look for that corroboration of others, one fails to avail oneself of some very good source of credibility or justification for one's position. So epistemic bubbles truncate this cool peer review process that is essential for rationality and attaining truth. The second epistemic problem with epistemic bubbles is that they lead to exaggerated sense of confidence of the members of the group. If you only keep hearing people that agree with you, it sounds like either it's the what you believe is self-evident, any reasonable person would believe it, or it sounds like a lot more people believe it, right? If you keep hearing the same thing over and over again, it just seems so natural to believe it. So one of the unfortunate side effects of being in epistemic bubbles is that people's confidence of their beliefs weight outstrips their actual knowledge, their actual evidence, their actual competence in whatever it is that they're doing. So it exaggerates what people actually know. So that's bad. The good news about epistemic bubbles, though, is that they're relatively easy to burst. Once one realizes that one is an epistemic bubble, one would want to walk out of the bubble so they can know better, at least if one cares about truth and knowledge. And then it would be relatively easy just be exposed to external evidence. Or if one does not realize one is an epistemic bubble, but one stumbles upon, someone outside that has evidence that there's something wrong with the inside, right? Once stumbles upon outside voices, the epistemic bubble can easily burst. That's why it's a bubble. It can burst easily because people within it are not like forcing the discrediting people outside. So epistemic bubbles are bad, but they're relatively easy to fix. It's relatively easy to escape. Echo chambers, however, they're much darker. They're much worse. The first observation about epistemic problems with echo chambers, is that it has all of the same deficiencies as epistemic bubbles. It reinforces the confidence of the believer within it. It lacks the peer review process of people outside, right? So the same limitations and knowledge that epistemic bubbles have, echo chambers have as well, but it's much worse. Here are some of the reasons that make echo chambers much worse. Often the creation of echo chambers or the incorporation of someone into an echo chamber looks pretty much indistinguishable from cult indoctrination. There's this process of isolating the members from anything external to the group. There's this process of trying to convince someone to come in, or they're born into the echo chamber, that everything but the group should be distrusted. That there's this implanting of distrust for anything that is not identified with this group. So it really looks just like a cult. So here's a quote from the article. Here, people that are part of the echo chamber, they hear but distrust outside voices. So it's not just an epistemic bubble. Outside voices don't burst it. Their worldview can survive exposure to those outside voices because their belief system has prepared them for such an intellectual onslaught. In other words, part of what makes echo chambers is that the person within it has been indoctrinated into thinking that only members of the echo chamber possess the truth and all the truth and nothing but the truth, that everything outside of the echo chamber is untrustworthy precisely because it's outside. And as I said earlier, it might be even worse. They might be stupid or evil. They might be trying to attack the echo chamber. So it's a pretty scary kind of position to be in. Part of what tends to hold the coherency of the echo chambers is appealing to conspiracy theories. There is this group of people that are controlling everything around me. That seems to be a way of making coherent the fact that so many seemingly different groups outside of your echo chamber disagree with you. If you unify them into this conspiracy, it kind of makes them more intelligible. But in any case, part of echo chambers tend to come with conspiracy theories and tend to make the members of the echo chamber be more prone to accept conspiracy theories in order to preserve the integrity of the worldview generated by the echo chamber. So how do we escape echo chambers? It's a question that everyone should ask themselves. Are the groups that I participate in, do they actively inculcate distrust of anyone but the group? If I'm going to speak in one of my groups, do I have to first and foremost establish my credibility? In other words, if I'm in this social media group, and in order for people to listen to me, do I first have to say things that clearly flag me as a member of the group for everyone else to listen to me? If those are flags, if that's going on, there's a very good chance that that's an echo chamber. If part of the dynamics of interaction of the people are that of excluding outside voices and only granting credibility to people that are inside because they're inside, and distrusting the outsider because they're outsiders, that's an echo chamber. But it's obviously intellectually bad. How do we escape it, though? Here's one possibility: intellectual autonomy, thinking for oneself. Start looking at the evidence, starting to assess it. Don't just trust members within the group. There's some promise here. However, this is a limited strategy. And the main reason for the limitation is that most of us, including, say, people with PhDs like myself, can only know so much. We are experts in a relatively small part of the world as it is. Most of us, even again, PhD people like myself, cannot really tell the difference between, say, a good and a bad biologist, a good and a bad statistician, and so on, a good and a bad, doctor, meteorologist. Most of those, areas of expertise. Um, Someone can knows enough to speak like they know what they're talking about, and to us outsiders, like we cannot tell the difference between the great superstar within the group and the mediocre one who can speak kind of like they do. We just don't have enough expertise to identify these experts by ourselves. So it is extremely hard for us to be intellectually autonomous and test everything. There's just too much out there. In fact, one of the cool observations in the article is that the very possibility of echo chambers is parasitic on this vulnerability, the fact that we know so little. Even if we're experts in an area, we just don't know so much about other areas. And it is our ignorance that is exploited by members of echo chambers in painting a picture that is so obviously wrong, but we just don't know enough to know that it's so obviously wrong. But anyway, so that's one strategy, intellectual autonomy. There's some potential, but the other things, maybe not too much. Maybe it's not a great strategy. Perhaps this is the best strategy, he thinks. He calls it Cartesian epistemic reboot. This is after Descartes. So Rene Descartes, a great philosopher of the 17th century, he famously tried to demolish the edifice of knowledge. That's his words. He noticed that a lot of the beliefs tend to form webs, or he said a house. There's a kind of edifice. Some beliefs are based on other beliefs, which are themselves based on other beliefs, and so on. And he thought that if there is some superstition, there's some false belief, some conspiracy theory, some unjustified belief somewhere, it just kind of spreads, it contaminates, it affects the way in which it informs other beliefs, and the whole edifice, the whole web of belief seems to be compromised. So how can we tell which of our beliefs is justified and which one's not? It's hard to tell. So the project, Descartes' project, was to just demolish the whole thing. He thought, let me just start from scratch. Let me not believe anything, and begin from things that are completely certain, and then build from there. That's one possibility. And in fact, that's exactly how some people have escaped cults in echo chambers. The article presents a famous story of Derek Black. Derek Black lived in Florida. He was raised by neo-Nazi parents. He was exposed to a lot of neo-Nazi propaganda. And he was pretty smart. He was seen as someone who would take a leadership role in the neo-Nazi movement within the US. However, he went to college. And when he went to college, he was exposed to a wide range of perspectives. And he was kind of shocked by the multiplicity of perspectives. And when he came to realize that he was part of an echo chamber, a mistaken echo chamber, a white supremacist echo chamber, his way out was just by suspending all belief. And he just started reading all sorts of material. He started talking to Jewish people, to Muslim people, and so on. He just started exposing himself to the diversity of the world with no prejudice that they were inferior or necessarily mistaken. He more or less had to rebuild his whole web of belief. So that's one possible way out. It's a kind of radical way out, but perhaps the best way out of an echo chamber. There's an interrelated way out, and this is not separate. That's not independent from option number two. In fact, it tends to come together with option number two, and that's just seeing the humanity of those outside of the echo chamber. Again, one of the basic features of the echo chamber in distrusting outsiders is not merely the one thinks that they are mistaken, but rather that they're stupid and evil. And if you have, stupid and evil, those are pretty strong words. So if you go and actually see someone that you think is stupid and evil, and you talk to them and you realize, actually, they don't seem that evil. They have deficiencies, we all do. They don't look that stupid either. Like they seem to have intelligent things to say. So if one starts to see the humanity of those that the echo chamber is labeling as evil and stupid, and realizing for oneself that they're not, that kind of seems to break the pernicious element of the echo chambers and might allow the person to escape. And in fact, that's exactly what happened to Derek. Matthew Stevenson, a Jewish undergraduate in the same college where Derek was attending, invited Derek to his group, welcomed him, treated him well, and that just disarmed Derek. And his gradual escape out of the echo chamber began by building trust with this Jewish person, one that Derek was, raised to believe so horrible things about. So it was this human connection and building of trust with someone outside that ultimately became the exit point for Derek. That's also a way out of the echo chamber. But anyway, let's end here. I will see you next time.